Welcome to Mark My Words, a show that searches for the fork in the road in life, the place where the turning point in the journey of entrepreneurship and life can be found. Let's meet each other at the crossroads on Mark My Words. If you've been following along with my journey for the past 5 years, you know that the progression and just the growth with me as a podcast host and producer, it's been an interesting and hopefully fun journey. It's been fun for me. I have really tried to drop some advice, not only on running a business, but running a podcast as time is going on. And I know that I haven't really had a straight episode of just talking about podcasting until today. I have somebody who I believe and know is extremely knowledgeable. They have really good advice. They're also a fellow Philadelphia area person, which I am no longer there. They are still there, and I am in sunny Florida instead. I do know that Vince Quinn, he is not only the host and executive producer of It's Not Just Talking, he's also the creative director of his own company, SBX Productions. He's been in radio a good percentage of his career. He has a fantastic voice. I wish that I could have Vince just speak for me. I'll write the script. His voice sounds great. And I've been working in media for a long enough time that I'm like, man, that guy's got a great voice. But without further ado, Vince Quinn, welcome to Mark My Words. How you doing today?
Hello. I figured I'd lean into the voice for a second there. Nice to be here, Mark. Yeah, appreciate the intro. Very kind words from you. As a business owner, as a podcaster, yeah, like there's it's a crazy world. I love being in it, and happy to talk about everything around getting there and what I'm doing, all the fun stuff today.
Well, when I first started out as a podcaster, and I still have generally the same layout. I have a ring light, I have a mic. I don't have a mixer. You would think somebody working in the media field would have a mixer and all this stuff. I really don't. And I always reference, I have this laptop little desk and this little microphone holder that I sit the mic on top of. This is about as bare bones and authentic as you can probably get. But with that technical knowledge, I can still make a lot out of very little. And I don't really know where I'm going with that exactly, but I really just talk about, it's been 5 years. I started out very authentic, and I'm still kind of holding my own, being that authentic, but hopefully producing good content still. And it's great to have a lot of gadgets and a lot of cool stuff, but you can do a lot with a little, with, very little.
Yeah, I mean, my setup right now is pretty much the same as yours, right? I've got a ring light, I've got a webcam that was not very expensive, honestly. It was like $100, $120, and this microphone, which just plugs straight into my computer, no mixer. There's a basic mixer software that comes with the mic, but like it's not fancy. I don't touch it. So yeah, I keep it pretty lightweight too. And I honestly, I think that's something people tend to overrate. Like, oh, I need to buy all of this super fancy equipment, all that stuff. Like, no, you don't. So many people are making good shows. It's like, is there a level of, yes, you want something that isn't just AirPods or, you know what I mean? Like, yeah, sure. Like there's certain standards you want to hit, but beyond that, as long as people can actually tell what you're saying, you know what I mean? Like, who cares? So I think it gets totally blown out of proportion, and that's part of what makes it fun is it's accessible.
I totally agree. And I think speaking of being accessible and authentic, let's go and maybe that's not speaking of that. It was a poor attempt at a segue, but
I thought
I
it worked. I thought it worked.
I appreciate that. Well, you would know you're like the radio host guy. I have a little tiny bit of radio experience, but I'll tell you about that maybe a little bit later. It's an interesting story, but I want to
Okay.
hear your interesting story. And you, sir, have a fantastic voice, as I keep praising you for. I want to find out if you knew, because you went to school for communication and media studies, did you know that you wanted to work in media? Did you know that people like me tell you you have a really great voice, you should do voiceovers or work in radio? How did you wind up getting into media?
Yeah. So when I was in college, for me at that time, I wanted to be in television was the main goal. I wanted to be like a writer on a talk show, or I wanted to do comedy. I was really into comedy. And after college, I was working at some comedy clubs and writing jokes for people when I was in radio. And so I was around a lot of that stuff, but I had no idea where I was going to actually go. I mean, I went to school in New York. So I went to Fordham up there. And I was like, yeah, I'll try to get a job in New York and I'll work in television. And like, I had no idea what I was doing. I had no connections whatsoever. And very quickly, I realized, okay, this is a mess for me. And what I might as well do just to figure it out, let me go home. Being in Philly, like, I'll go home. And I'm just going to start putting pieces together and like figuring my life out. And that's why, I was doing comedy, like I was around it. But what I did in the meantime is I was podcasting is really how it started because I just wanted a proof of concept for a job. I just wanted to be like, hey, I've got some technical skills and I built this website on WordPress in 2012. I designed the logos in Photoshop and I was running the podcast on the website. I was writing articles, but it was all sports stuff because, like everybody in Philly from 2008 to now has a sports podcast, I think, at one point or another. So so I was one of those people, but it was a work resume for me. And I had a couple other guys that were looking to get some opportunities together, so we were doing it together. And it was cool. But I didn't think I was going to actually work in sports as much as I was a complete obsessive about it and like had all these jerseys and went to games and like everything. I knew everybody in the NFL. Like I was a nut. So I got the opportunity shortly after I got home after college where an uncle called me out of the blue and he was trying to help me out and just get me a job somewhere. And he's like, "Hey, I know some people in sales and radio that are looking for help. Are you interested in that?" And I was like, "No, not interested, but thank you." So I hung up the call and he called back a couple days later. He's like, "Hey, well, it turns out they also want people for promotions, which is like, going to events, setting up a tent, spin the wheel and get a pen." Like I was like, yeah, that sounds like fun. Like, why not? That's such a weird, goofy thing. So I started doing that. And that was my door into sports radio. I was doing it for the sports radio station in Philly, so WIP, one of the biggest sports talk stations in the country. And for me, it had all this. It was cool because I used to watch. There's a local station called Comcast Sportsnet, which you might be aware of, right? And like growing up, so watching all these big names there for me, and it was like Michael Barkan's a huge name, for example. He was a host at WIP when I got there. It was like, holy crap! So guys like that. I got to start working with them, and I'm like, oh, okay. Well, I am a sports obsessive, and I do have a podcast, and these guys are a sports radio station. Like, I can do this. Like, I can make this happen. And so that was really the whole thing of like how it started of me finding my way into radio, and just beginning to turn on the jets and start building a career.
I think you and I are a real reflection of how you can still make inroads in the media business by just taking jobs that aren't necessarily very glamorous because I, much like you, have wound up with some pretty big name companies, but have had to take jobs that I don't even think most people know that type of work I do even exists. At least people know that some of the things you've done exist. Because how many people know that there are people on the other side is a very dark room wherever you are, where it's Connecticut, New York, LA, Atlanta, wherever they have a network or even, a local station. I think they still have people watching the live feeds. And that's a job that people do. You get paid money to do that, to watch I mean, there's more to it. There's technical things that go into it, but you get paid to, basically watch that channel or that network or that event, whatever it is that you're doing. And a lot of people don't know that these kind of jobs exist or are ways to get yourself into the media business. So I love having you on here to at least tell and vouch for my side because I can relate. And I can also relate to the fact that if you didn't have your own personal projects, you eventually wind up developing that and you'll be around people who have their own projects like you did stand up, you eventually became a podcaster. So all of us working in the media field, we're not just one trick ponies. We're all looking for a way to get our voices heard.
Big time. I mean, the amount of people that are really grinding and trying to find that opportunity and the different ways that you go about trying to make it happen. It's really serious. I mean, I was working on a bunch of different podcasts with people at the station once I got there because they wanted to start a show and they want to get hosting reps. And so I was doing that. And for a job standpoint, I mean, I was writing articles here and there. I got into management with the promotions department. So I was like calling prize winners and setting up those prizes and dealing with the back end system. I was doing news updates. I was doing the random stuff in the overnights for the music station WOGL, just like you said, like watching the feed, making sure it didn't crash, that all the commercials played. So stuff like that. I mean, just like anything, man. I mean, it's just so much stuff. But yeah, it was all with the idea of eventually I want that shot on air. Like I want to do whatever I can once I realized I could do it. Because I mean, for me, it was funny, like getting in from the promotions side. Like it's not common for somebody to go from promotions over to being on the air, but I saw that one guy did it before, and I was like, oh, so yeah, like I'm gonna go for that. And then I just had to actively, as I was doing everything else around the station, like I would finish shifts in promotions, I'd like unload the tents and all that. And I would just go over to the producer's booth and sit in with them because it was 10 o'clock at night and nobody was around and they were bored. And I'd just be like, hey, can you tell me a little bit about like what's going on here and how this works and what you're doing here? And I had a couple of guys that were nice enough to explain all of that to me. So by the time they needed a producer, I was able to get that. And then, same thing. Like I'm podcasting all this time. I'm now producing shows, so I'm around them in that capacity. It got to a point where they needed hosts, and that was my opportunity to get in the door there too.
And this is where I think you and I are a little different because my goal for a long time was to be a little more behind the scenes. I wanted to become like a video editor, a producer. I didn't think I had the right sound in my voice, which is, I guess, where it comes from with me praising yours so much. I'm like, man, that guy's got the golden voice. But I grew up, I'm born with a cleft palate and lip, and I'm like, I don't have the right look, I don't have the right sound, and your imposter syndrome, you're doubting yourself, and it took for me to go to Lincoln Local in the Baltimore area, just started meeting people and talking about making content, and they were like, hey, you should make content. I'm like, what? Me? Like, no, I think deep down inside, I always wanted to be doing something like this, but I had imposter syndrome and just didn't believe that I could until I got the encouragement that I needed.
Yeah, it's hard. I mean, it's scary, right? You're going in front of all of these different people, and for me, it was terrifying because I'm doing sports radio in Philly. This is in itself that is an insane thing to do, right? Like I'm on the air at the most like wild fan base in America, essentially, like super diehard. And if they don't like you on stuff or they think you're wrong on stuff, they will crush you. So I was around a lot. And to put myself, I hosted my first show at 25, which like not many people have done. I'm one of the youngest people in the history of the station to ever host a show. Like it was a big deal. But the thing is, it was terrifying because I am so young and I'm getting in front of all of these people and I want to be taken seriously and I really cared about it. So get negative feedback was hard. And at the same time, just from the radio in itself being a difficult thing because you get calls, you hear from the public. Like to be a musician and have music go out if people don't like it that much, whatever. But like radio, they will literally call you and be like, "Hey, you're an idiot, and I can't believe that you have a show, and you should just quit right now. Like, keep your day job, buddy." Like, so stuff like that was really hard. And then this is when everybody was on Twitter. Like sports radio was fueled by Twitter because that's where all the news broke. Athletes were saying crazy things on there. Like you just had to be there. And that's how people were building their personal brand. So like to do the radio stuff and get the feedback there and Twitter and trying to like figure out how my personality works on Twitter, which it really didn't. I never figured it out, honestly. It was just miserable, man. Like it was terrifying. And it just took me a long time where I've always had this mindset of even if I'm terrified of a certain thing, if I really want to do it, it's like I'm just going to beat myself up so much. Like I'm just going to keep showing up until the nerves stop because I've been there so long and it's just exhausting to continually be that stressed. But my anxiety levels when I was first starting to host, I mean, they were through the roof. Like I legitimately walked like 6 miles before my first show because I was so stressed and I didn't know what to do with that energy and I just had to move. And I walked all the way across Philly and back because I just had to. So I mean, it's very real. And sometimes it's a good thing in a sense, right? Because sometimes it pushes you to like be this best version of yourself. Like it can make you do that, but the limitation of the doubt until you get to that point is I mean it's devastating. So it's a really complicated thing.
So talk a little bit about actually starting up your own business and podcasts and just what you did to get yourself up and going. Was there any anxiety about starting a podcast, your own show? It's a reflection of you. Obviously, being on the radio is also a reflection of you, but it's also a reflection of the company as well. But now you're like, this is me. This is like 1,000% me. So talk a little bit about getting ramped up and the experience with that.
Yeah, so it's interesting, right? Because the big thing for me was I got into podcasting as a business because in part I was falling out of love with radio. And you know, for people who haven't paid a lot of attention to it, like the radio industry is terrible, frankly. It's a terrible business to be in. I mean, there's layoffs constantly. The numbers continue to shrink. Less people listen to the radio than ever, right? Because everybody's at home with remote work. And if they're in the car, they're listening to podcasts, they're listening to their own music. You have Spotify, Apple. So like it's a very tough industry. And with being so corporately run, like there's just it's a very difficult game. And it was one of those things where I kind of had to look in the mirror and be like, okay, well, I've gotten very far as a young guy in this industry, but can I build a life and career here? And I really didn't trust the ability to do it. I've seen too many people that are solid professionals just get kicked around and have to, you know, find a new job and career in their 50s or just move to different cities all the time. And that was terrifying. It's not something I wanted any part of. Like I wanted some sort of security and commitment. And I was trying to do that for a while through just being so good that they give me an afternoon show or a morning show. And I would just do that. But it just got to a stage where I just didn't trust it. And so I'm like, okay, well, I don't trust this. And I have done podcasting and I was podcasting in different ways during the entirety of my radio career. So I had a lot of experience and I got approached through some conversations I was having with the studio that existed in Philly. So it was in the area. One of the guys who had been with the podcast studio for like 4 years, which was super ahead of the curve. I mean, they started in like 2016 or something like that. 2015, they were helping local businesses and all start podcasts or local creatives start podcasts. It was like, damn, that's crazy. So this guy had started his own shop, but he wasn't a radio guy. He didn't have the experience that I had, and some other people I was talking with and working with at the time. So they were looking for some additional credibility and experience to go with it. So I had the opportunity to get in on what was this an already started business with this studio, this branch off studio that had been going for about a year. So I was like, okay, well, I mean, I've got one end of the spectrum, which is this corporate thing that I'm a lot higher at, and I could stay with this road for a while and see where it goes, or I can jump to this new thing, which is totally experimental, like everything about it, right? Like the podcast industry, this little studio. I didn't have a great relationship at all with the guy that I was jumping in with, but I just and I say that as in I hardly knew him, but it was a big opportunity. And so I was like, you know what? I'm a risk taker. I'm young. I'm going to do it. And I just took the leap. I mean, it was really that was it. I just thought I was at a point where I had to make a major life decision of what I thought my future should be. And I'd rather go for the higher upside of doing this experimental thing for myself in a new industry rather than just hope radio would treat me right and continue to sustain itself. I thought it eventually was an obvious choice.
I think it was a great choice. And I think all that experience working in radio, I'm sure, served you well as far as just business sense and kind of just at least having a foundation to know, okay, this is how I kind of want to start, this is how I want to produce. And even though I didn't have near the on air experience, the only thing I ever did on air many, many years ago at a local radio station, I had to sit there and monitor Penn State football and basketball games. And there were some ads where I had to read the like 5 second tag, and I'm
Yep.
still in college, so I don't have any experience, and I'm me, and I'm a person who has been told all their life, this, that, and the other thing. So the mic is hot, and it's my time to talk, and I'm just like, yeah, just, you can call 1-800, blah, blah, okay, yeah, and you can hear me like just totally flubbing over and going, oh gosh, and all that. And I'm like, all right, just go back to the game, like, just stop it. So it was that kind of experience. I didn't have that kind of a background. Everything was just all in my head, and then just the encouragement and, just that other side of the business and that experience, and really just basically how I came up with the concept for this show was like, okay, entrepreneurs are giving me encouragement. So I'll just give them a platform to tell their story. I like to hear stories. Like I've had like 50 billion jobs. So it's like I'm living through everybody. Like just talking to you. It's like, I feel like I've had that experience I never had to have. And I guess both of us did because the Wolfman Jacks of the world and all those other people that, hey, kittens and cats, that was all going away as we were growing up. So we never had that opportunity. And frankly, the way I read those tags off, I don't think that I would have been given the experience. But I mean, that's probably a good thing. But
Well, I think it's just a change, right? Like everything then was so particular and curated and whatever, and that's the beauty of podcasting. You can't contain it. Like it's just anybody who wants to take the opportunity can go do it, and you can do it your way. I think there's a lot to be said for that, right? Like shows, like okay, look at ESPN and most of the like anything that exists on ESPN, it's pretty much all debate shows. You're gonna get some people there, they're big personalities with strong decisions, and they're gonna debate the day's topics. And like you go through the stuff, and it's like, all right, well, all these guys are doing the same thing and on every show. It's all slightly different because they're not clones, but as much as they're the same, they're the same. So like, okay, that's the only way they're really doing it over there, and that's all they want. So that's the problem. And like radio, the problem was it's a 4-hour show. You're getting people every single day to kill 4 hours of time, which is just way too much time. And nobody podcasts for 4 hours these days. You know what I mean? Like to do that 4 hours, 5 days a week would be an insane thing to do. It's a terrible format and nobody's interested in it. So like now to be working on shows where it's like, hey, we're going to do a 4 minute episode and we'll see you next week. Like, awesome. You know what I mean? Like go do your thing. So having all that freedom, that flexibility, that style, like you can put whatever you want into podcasting, like very literally. And it's such a cool thing to be able to do that. And like for me now to help people figure out what that vision is and put it together and make it something they can actually do consistently. It's awesome. But radio is the complete opposite of that. It's just like, this is what we expect. It's in this format. It's at these times. And that's it. And kind of sucks.
Well, something that doesn't suck are your four pillars of podcasting. I really enjoyed watching your video where you explained your four pillars for creating a podcast for business. And I'm sure this is something you talk about every day with your clients. Talk a little bit about how you developed that and how you wound up incorporating it into not only your own podcast and your own business, but to helping clients.
Yeah, so it's interesting how it evolved because to some degree, once I got into podcasting, like truly making that jump from radio to podcasting, I didn't have any real business experience to speak of. I mean, I didn't know what it looked like to run books, to do sales, marketing. I didn't know any, like nothing. I had nothing. All I knew was how to run a show and do it very well. So I was very particular. I knew all those things, but that's all I ever had to focus on. And once I started, it was all these shows that didn't have any business experience either, and they were all entertainment shows, and they wanted to be the next big thing for sports or comedy or whatever it was. So I was working with people who had no business idea either, and their shows kept falling apart. So I'm like, okay, well, there has to be a business element here that works because they want a show that makes money and the studio also has to make money. And so there has to be a way to bridge this gap. And you know, that started with changing the kinds of clientele that we work with. Because for people who are just doing it as a passion, hey, go do that. And like there's things I can advise you on, but you can't pay a studio to manage an entertainment show that's not making any money. Like put in the time, put in the energy, make sure that's a real thing you want to do, get some energy behind it. And then, okay, now you've got a following. Let's talk and see how I can help. But to start those from scratch was crazy. So it was like, okay, I had to evaluate myself as a business owner and just learn how to be one and study constantly. So I'm always reading books. I'm always watching stuff. I'm always picking people's brains, listening to podcasts, just anything I can do to make me a better business owner. And as I've now started to transition where I'm working with businesses on their shows, I'm working with large organizations on their shows. I understand business now. I'm talking to business people constantly. So I can look at their business and I can now I'm at that stage where I can get all the podcast expertise that I had and pair it with the business knowledge to then make this the unified, successful thing. So going back a little bit to the four pillars then that you mentioned. So it was a lot of experience of seeing what this looks like on both sides, fully understanding it in and out, and then trying to think of what is the simplest way to evaluate this so we can all speak the same language and do that for the entirety of this partnership. So it starts with purpose, right? Purpose is pillar number one. So why are you doing this? What do you want to get out of it on the most basic level? So that has to be, if it's for me, for example, with my show. So I started that show to get awareness for my business. That was the number one goal. So, okay, that's all I care about. That's my main purpose. So I'm going to clip the hell out of that thing, which is absolutely what we do. We post stuff like literally 5 days a week. And then beyond that, I'm getting a newsletter out of that content. So that's populating that, which goes out every single week. So and then not to mention just the episodes. So there's so much content that's coming from that. I'm inviting people onto the show. I'm being a guest on shows, promoting the show. You know what I mean? So it's like, yeah, all these things together. I've built everything to start and it's going to evolve. But the first phase of the show has been awareness, and that's what we do. So that's our purpose, right? I build everything around purpose. Then beyond that, it is money. So everybody wants to make money on podcasts. Everybody's looking for sponsorships. That's not how it works. And especially if you're a business, like you're not going to make a lot of money. It is a very small percentage odds you're going to make money on a business podcast. And so it takes a ton of work. And honestly, for the most part, it's not even worth it, right? Until you get to a certain tier. Like it's not even worth the money. Like, just go and find out how to sell what you already do. This is your marketing, right? So people are always trying to treat it like a side hustle. It's a different show about different things. They don't mention their business so much. Like, let's talk about your business. Let's talk about what you do. Let's be consistent about that. And we're going to hammer it every single time because this is a way for you to generate leads and get direct conversations with people. So that is the money side. How is this bringing it in? It's aligning the show and using that as a marketing engine for the services or the products that you sell. So that's money and finding out the specific ways to do that. Message. So what are you saying? So what are the topics day in and day out? What is the branding for the show? How do you relate to your customers? What problems are you solving? Like, getting all of those things out, making sure you're doing it on the right platforms, and making sure that, everybody can fully easily understand it, connect with it, and it's the right people. You want to make sure that you're not appealing to everybody, or as much as you continue to refine what your audience is and niche down, like that's the idea. But I help people figure those things out because I can be that outside voice and I can help them shape those topics and drive it. And then lastly, purpose, money, message, and process. Great. So process. How do you do all this stuff consistently, right? It's, hey, you're going to do this podcast? Awesome. You want to post it everywhere? Awesome. You want to have a newsletter? Awesome. Okay. Who's in charge of that? And what software are you using? And when are you doing this? And how consistently is this going to happen? And all of that, right? It's just like the mechanics of doing it. There's so much work involved, and it seems deceptive because usually, hey, you're just sitting here, we're just having a good time, Mark. We're just two dudes shooting the shit. So it's so easy. But like, yeah, you have to plan this. We planned this, right? So we have conversations, we talk this out, we coordinate a time. You're going to be doing editing and uploading, and you know what I mean? It's just like there's so much stuff. So making sure that you can do that in such an efficient way. And as a business owner, it's also sometimes it's telling people to let go because they're doing all of that work. And it's like, listen, you can get an editor for not very much. And if you're willing to do that, your value to the business is better. Like, you are making the business more money by paying somebody else because you can put in the time to make money for the business. You know what I mean? Like that value comparison is not close. So being able to give people that perspective too on like, hey, there's things that you can do or your team can do, and no problem. Let's have your show work that way. But beyond that, to say, yeah, hey, you need to like offload some stuff and get some help in here because you are wasting so much time for nothing. Like, that is huge too. So yeah, tying all those things together, that's what the pillars are about. And it's just a nice way to separate all the different aspects of a show, like all those things that people are looking for and what it takes to execute, and tying it all together.
I can sum all this up by just saying the real work starts once you hit stop on record on your episode, is really how I can sum all this up. Because even in 2025, I'm just now figuring out how to grow my YouTube channel. I just moved everything, like my feed, to make myself like a verified YouTube podcaster, which I didn't know I could do until fairly recently. And that has made a huge difference as far as like obviously engagement on my channel. Might as well have tumbleweeds going through my channel, just, very hard to kind of figure out. And I just hadn't been putting the attention on it. And without really rambling on too much about how I'm growing and planning to grow this year, it's a constant project of how, okay, what's next? How can I grow? What can I do to be a better host? What can I do to be a better business? The work never stops. The easiest part is when my guest shows up and I don't screw up and we have a great conversation, much like this one.
Well, yeah, I mean, it is so much work that, like, it's funny thinking about all these different platforms and tying it all together. They're all different. It's gotten a little bit easier because everybody takes vertical video these days, so that's a relief. But beyond that, I mean, yeah, everything's got its own personality, its own attention, and for us, to a degree, we haven't tried to take care of all of them. To some degree, we're just posting on certain platforms like TikTok. I don't put any time into TikTok other than making sure we're getting some of the clips up. And like, is that the best thing to do? No, but in an ideal world, I have somebody that's managing the TikTok channel for our show. But the biggest thing for me right now is we've been able to generate these clips, get it on all of these platforms, and start to see what the initial reaction is so that we can gauge, okay, how are we doing on TikTok versus LinkedIn versus Instagram versus Facebook? Like it's seeing all of that. And at the same time, like we wanted awareness, we've been able to efficiently get the show on all of these platforms consistently. That's a win. That's a major win that not a lot of people get to. So it's like, okay, these are good things. Now, eventually, do we get somebody that's just focused on the socials and engaging on the accounts and all that kind of stuff? Like, yeah, sure, I would love to do that. But it's taking it in stages, like you said, and just constantly refining and improving and adding on to it and subtracting too for the stuff that doesn't work. Just kill it and move on and live your life. Like it's just not everything's going to work. This is all experimentation. So tying that all together is huge. But over time, the progress you see, and that's what this whole thing is, it's a long game, then that's what it's all about.
And talking about experimenting and analyzing and taking a look at what's working and what's not, I just started creating shorts and putting those on my YouTube channel. Amazing how many impressions that I'm getting just from the shorts and from timestamping. I didn't know that timestamping on YouTube, because these episodes, as much as I love doing them, and I hope everybody is, tuned into every second, I know it's long, it's 45, 50 minutes. But by timestamping, you can jump to whatever, like, oh, that thing Mark's talking about is stupid. I'm not going to listen to that. But that thing Vince is talking about, that sounds interesting. I'm jumping to that because that guy knows something. That's like a very self-deprecating example. But I mean, that's the world we live in. And I think it's great because if I type something in and as I'm timestamping and you're like, what Mark's talking about here is not interesting or it sucks, it's stupid, I can skip over. But hey, it looks like he's going to say something brilliant here. I'm skipping to that. And I took kind of the self deprecation back a little bit. But I think it's great. So you get the full episode, but you can also get it in a short dose. And if you look at the analytics, it'll tell you like where people are finding it, what search words they're putting in. It's so helpful. It's amazing.
Yeah, the tools out there that you can get to support your content. I mean, there's so much stuff out there. And that's what we're trying to figure out too now, right? It's like, okay, well, what are some things that we think we would want to incorporate? Like YouTube is going to be something we put more energy into, because for now it's been all right. Well, we're getting the episodes up. Everything's been good. We've only been doing the show since October. Like it's a new show and it was the end of October. So it's a brand new show, all things considered. And we're still continuing to expand and adapt a lot of things on just the base level. But YouTube, yeah, that's where everybody is. The discoverability is really great. So what are the best ways to go about doing that for our show, for our customers? And for now, just taking the data on, hey, this reel did really well. That's something, people love that short. So let's go pay attention to that. Let's make sure we're doing I'll put more time to check in. Like once a week, I'll check in and see if we've got comments on anything that we do just to get back to people. So yeah, it's like prioritizing and shifting and refining all of that. But that's why I think to the point, like there's people out there that are like, well, podcasting is really only audio and video. It's like, get over the argument. It's over. It's done. It's already happened. And there's no point in fighting it. Like if you don't want to do video, I think that's fine. But to deny people from the discoverability of YouTube versus any other platform is just insane. Like I think it's a legitimate disservice if I didn't recommend to my clients that, hey, you can be on YouTube and you can do all of this. If you can't afford video right now, to have somebody editing your video, or you don't feel comfortable putting in the time to do that yourself or whatever, like fine, we can do audio and we'll just do video clips and we'll go from there. But the discoverability that it is hard to beat. So yeah, as much as you can get on there, and now with YouTube podcasts, it's gotten better to start to bridge that gap. So it's getting better all the time. But YouTube is where it's at.
Well, I know where it's at, and I don't want to do a disservice to you or the audience as I segue into the next segment here. I know we're running a little short on time. I don't want to keep you forever. This could easily be a 4 hour conversation. So we met on Podmatch, and it's a really great platform for meeting people and developing your guests, and to also find shows to maybe be on as a guest, not just to be a host, but also a guest. It's an excellent platform. That's how Vince and I connected. And I'm looking over, said all that because I'm looking over all of the questions you're ready to answer, and I hope you're ready. There's a few that hopefully
Sure.
we can touch on real quick and not take up too much time. But two things that really stand out are how we should think about monetizing our podcast and the best way to approach interviews. And I know if anybody would be an expert in that one, it would definitely be you. And I know that's kind of a weird two-part question, and you can start with whatever you want. I'd love to know your perspective on both of those.
Sure. Well, it's an easy enough two-part answer. I mean, for the first part, when you're talking about monetizing, right? It's something that we talked about a little bit earlier. It's especially as a business owner, right? Number one, hey, you own a business, you are starting a show to run your business. Talk about your business. Like, talk about what your business is. Talk about the solutions that you offer, the opinions that you have that separate you from the competition that you've got, because that's what this whole game is. It's your marketing. Like, this is your way to advertise. If you would, you want to advertise on TV, you want to have billboards, you want to advertise on the radio or other podcasts. Like, it is the same thing. So you don't want to look at this up front like, oh, I need to get advertising on my TV advertisement. You know what I mean? Like, that's not what you pay for the advertisement, and then you expect the return on investment because people see your business, are aware of it and your solutions, and then go hire you. So like, that's what you want, and that's how you need to approach this. So sell what you do through the podcast. And if it's not a one for one with the show that you've got, make sure you take the time to mention your services and your products. Like, hey, I do all this stuff, but by the way, this is my business. This is what we're about. This is how we help people. So like, that is the biggest thing. And that's especially for the people that I work with. For people who want to do these entertainment shows, these passion projects, be light at first on the expenses. Have some idea of what a model looks like for you. I mean, there's a lot of things that you can do with a show. It just depends on what your skill set is and how you want to go about it. Like, if you're expecting to sell 1 million t-shirts and all, like, that is a hard road. It's doable, but that premium content, like everything you want to do, it starts with community building. If you can't get the audience and build that, whether it's around the show or a Discord or whatever it is, like whatever you can do, then that's going to be your big sticking point. But you ultimately monetize your audience. So that's where it comes from. That's what people are interested in as sponsors and whatever. So you got to find a way to build an audience and then see what they want and provide that. And that's what you're looking for on a base level. So there's everything with monetizing. For interviews, it's really one of those things, and I think you've done a good job with this, Mark, is like taking some time to talk about yourself and what you do and experiences you've had, because a lot of times people will bring guests onto a show and they don't say anything about themselves. And it's literally just like quick question, quick question, quick question, quick question. And meanwhile, the guest is going off for 10 minutes, 10 minutes, 10 minutes. And by the time you get to the end of the episode, you've spoken for a minute and they've spoken for 59 minutes. Like, nobody's learning about you. Nobody's taking out anything of your brand. There's no reason to hire you. Like, for all the things that you want, it's your marketing. So if you're like, hey, listen, I'm going to buy this TV advertisement. I'm going to spend 29 seconds talking about Pizza Hut. And then for the last second, I'll mention that I also have a business. Like, okay, good luck. Pizza Hut is glad that you bought the ad. So like, it's just kind of one of those things. But yeah, you got to find the opportunity to introduce yourself into the conversation because it's your platform. You own this. You're doing this for you. So as much as you want to connect with people, great. But make sure your audience hears from you because otherwise they're not really your audience. They're just tuning in for a rotating cast of other people that own your stage.
I think it becomes easier as time goes on to interject your personality into the show. And I'm just speaking on personal experience because I came into this hoping to have the approach and just the presentation that I have now. But I had a few guests early on. They were really good guests. They were awesome. They had awesome businesses, careers, and spoke very well. But there were there's two in particular. There might have been one or two others. I'm not gonna name names. I would never do that. But it, they kind of like took over the show a little more than I wanted them to. And I know you talk about that in one of your videos. It happened to me unintentionally, but it doesn't really happen to me anymore because I think after over 100 episodes and I'm at least out there a little bit, and I also have found better avenues to find guests. Not that the guests earlier were bad; they were all like really cool, really good. But I think the guests that I've been getting more and more, I think, understand the etiquette a little more. And maybe it's partly me that's also established that, this is my show. I've done over 100 of these now. And I think with that, you kind of earn a badge as well. So for me, it was a little bit of a mishmash of things going on until now I'm just like, yeah, as you put it in one of your videos, you're driving the ship, and or driving the car. I can't remember which vehicle, but
But all the same,
all the same.
yeah. And that's it. Like it takes time, it takes repetition. You have to experience the conversations in that dynamic. As much as this is conversation, it's a totally different format for conversation, right? Like talking with somebody at the lunch table is a lot different than being on stage in front of a crowd of 100 people or 300 people. Like that's totally different. This is totally different. So you just have to get used to those rhythms. And then like same thing when you're booking guests and all that kind of stuff. You get a feel as you're dealing with people of what their vibe is. You probably get an idea within 2 minutes of like, I'm gonna need to lock in on this person a little bit. Like they're gonna be, so it's yeah, like that's the beauty of experience is you do get better at all of this and to a way you can curate how those things operate within your show because you are in control. I mean, one of the things that I do, like I do pre-interviews. So I'll get somebody and I'll just 10 minutes. That's it. I'm just like, hey, can you give me 10 minutes? I want to talk to you about some things. And I'll ask them some questions that can make it easier for me to get to a certain place at the starting point for the show. So I will be what in a normal conversation would take me 10, 15 minutes to get to. The show starts there. That's part of my advantage to the pre-interview. But then the other side is I get people that I can feel it like you're talking about and they're just not stopping and they're like selling way too hard on everything that they're doing and it's just like this is not what this is not what I want and it gives me that opportunity to root people out as well and I think that's just as important to tell people no because it's like, hey man, this is not a fit. I just like, hey, go on all the shows you want. That's what this is for, but it ain't going to be mine. Like I need the right kind of person.
I can't emphasize enough the importance of a pre-interview. And it's something that I used to do a lot more, especially before I kind of got established a little bit, before I got on to Podmatch, especially. I would do the pre-interview, and you brought back some memories, some interesting memories, because there were a few that so as much as I want people like the Vinces of the world, where the vibe, I know it's gonna be good, and it is really good, I also want to take a few chances and have people who have like really good experience or expertise or does something in their business that I haven't really focused on, and I'll take a little bit of a gamble on a personality that's not quite the vibe that I would, I guess, prefer. And I feel like that's just the nature of the kind of show that I signed up for. And that's something you just gotta be willing to just say, okay, it's not gonna be that kind of show. It's gonna be this kind of show. So you need to have that approach. But it's so important to kind of get a feel and the pre-interview, even though we didn't do one, I just knew, but I knew this was gonna be great. But the pre-interview is very important. It can save you a ton of grief and I highly recommend it too.
Yeah, I mean, think about like there's been times where it was so funny when I was dating. I'm married now, but there was a point when I was dating and I sat down on this date and literally within 2 minutes I knew it was not a fit. 2 minutes. And she didn't do anything like outrageous. I could just tell from her energy and all. Like I'd been on a lot of dates at that point. I knew what I was looking for. And I found out like right away that it was not going to be a fit. So now I'm sitting there for an hour at a bar with this girl, and it's just like, what am I even doing here? Like, what am I doing for her? I'm wasting her time. Like, I was too polite to say anything, but oh my god, I mean, it was the worst. And to consider that kind of feeling, and then it applies to a situation where it's like, oh, well, this is recorded and this is going to get like I would ideally be publishing this. Like, why do that to yourself? You know what I mean? Like, it's okay if it's not a fit, or even if it turns out afterwards you decide it's not a fit, just don't air it. Like, you're not obligated to air things. You know what I mean? Sometimes if it's really that bad of an experience, you do control it. So control it and just say, you know what, it just went bad. Sorry. Whatever you have to say to the person for not airing it. But odds are somebody like that, they probably won't even follow up or care. So it's up to you. But yeah, it's just crazy how it goes.
Such great advice. Boy, we could go a lot more time, but I don't want to make this the kind of episode that nobody will want to sit through because it's like 4 hours long. So let me just ask you to tell everybody how they can find you, how they can work with you. And then I got one more question on the way out.
Sure. So, new addition for me, freepodcasthelp.com. How's that for a website, baby? Freepodcasthelp.com. What I'm doing there is I'm giving free strategy sessions. So if you want the chance to sit down with me, talk for 10 minutes about what your show is, the whole idea is I'll have some questions for you about, what you're doing day to day with the show, where you want it to go. I'll take all that information before the call. So then by the time we actually sit down for that 10 minutes, it is like straight to the heart of it, very surgical. I want to give you things that you can walk away with and apply to your show. And so that's what it's all about. But if you want to get one of those 10-minute strategy sessions, freepodcasthelp.com.
All right. Hey, what more can you want than freepodcasthelp.com?
Can't beat it. It was a grind to get that URL too. I'll tell you,
I'm
man. I was
sure.
searching like 30 different, does this work? Does this work? No. Oh, this is $80,000. Great. So like, yeah, trying to find something that was available and not an insane price and easy to remember was like such a ridiculous thing.
Well, speaking of free podcast help, if I just sat through this whole episode and I was like, wow, I'm really inspired, I think I might want to start a podcast. What's one piece of advice that you would give to somebody just to help them get started or to develop confidence or whatever it might be? What's like the golden nugget of advice that you would have to give?
Yeah. So the number one thing I can tell people who want to start a show and be confident in that commitment, do a pilot. And what I mean by that is like a television show. It's, hey, we're going to do one episode. And if we like it, the network is going to give it a full season. And your show should be the same thing. Like do one and understand the workload. Do everything that needs to be done for that show. Go plan it. If you're booking a guest, do that. If you're going to edit everything and get social clips and write posts, like do the work and see what it looks like. You don't have to post it, literally any of it. You don't have to actually put up the social posts or anything, but do the work and understand what it looks like, review the show, be critical of what it is, make sure that it's something you can actually do and you can consistently put the time in for. So that is everything. And you're not on the clock in this case, right? So take your time. If it turns out that as you're doing the pilot, it's like, well, it's good, but I don't think it's quite there, or I had two different ideas, let me try this other one. Like, go do that. Just do pilots until you feel like you love the concept, you're confident in it, and you're ready to share it with people, and do this all the time. And until you're not, until you get to that point, you're on your own time. Like, just do it for you, be as good as you can be, and then launch when you're ready. But do the pilot first.
That is incredible advice. I couldn't agree with you more. I kind of feel as you were explaining all that, that basically the whole first season in 2020 of Mark My Words was a pilot episode, pilot season. And it really told me, especially once I took a step back from it, because 2020 was such a crazy year. I created the concept for all this before the pandemic. So it wasn't like, oh, the pandemic hit. What the hell? I'm going to do this. I was like all in even before the pandemic. And I took a step back after doing those episodes and kind of figured out that, yeah, I do have something to build on and it felt good and I enjoyed it. And, you sometimes with anything, a business, a podcast, sometimes you just gotta do it. Have your niche, have an idea, have, as you put it, a purpose, but really don't get in your head too much. Just go for it. Just do it. And if you mess up or you make mistakes, then you can do better the next time. And that would be my parting shot on your parting shot. And Vince Quinn, I will again just emphasize not only freepodcasthelp.com, but he is the creative director of SBX Productions. He's the host, executive producer of the podcast It's Not Just Talking, which it clearly isn't because I learned a ton from Vince today. Thank you so much for being here. This was amazing. I feel like we could do 50 hours, 100 parts of this, but I want to keep it to close to an hour at least. So thanks for being here, Vince.
Yeah, Mark, yeah, I agree that we could do a week's worth of radio. But beyond that, yeah, an hour is perfectly good with me. It's nice we can finally get the time. And thanks for having me on.
You bet anytime. So this was Vince Quinn. I'm Mark Schmidt. You just listened to Mark My Words. Thanks for listening, and Vince, thanks for being my guest. And I'll see you soon. Bye. Thank you for taking time out of your busy day to go on a journey with me into entrepreneurship and life on Mark My Words. If you would like to learn more about me and the show, you can find me on LinkedIn at Mark Schmidt or connect with me on Instagram at Nimrod79. Video episodes of Mark My Words, as well as other content, can also be found on the Mark My Words YouTube page. Entrepreneurship can be quite the roller coaster ride. It can be a bit isolating and intimidating, but it doesn't have to be that way. Let's meet here next time at the Crossroads on another episode of Mark My Words.